our host, Fajer Almanaie, who is a behavioral analyst, to answer our questions and to enrich our viewers with all the answers that she may share. Welcome, Fajer, to our show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Ms. Fajer, we'll start off by just asking, obviously the children have gone through a lot of virtual learning. How do you think that's actually possibly changed the way children now look at virtual learning? Do you think it's a positive thing, a negative thing? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's definitely a mix of both. There are some kids who think it's a positive thing because they, are usually more anxious in a classroom. So being virtual, they were in their home environment, so they were a lot more comfortable. And then there's also some kids who took it as an opportunity to kind of, slack and their motivation kind of decreased because they were more interested in going to school because of the socializing, and obviously virtual schools has decreased that, so there's a very large lack of motivation in online schooling.
Yeah, I think speaking of slacking, obviously as a dentist I see kids on the chairs sometimes, and I have a lot of morning clinics, and sometimes we see kids and I say, well, it's a morning appointment, are you sure you want that appointment? And they're like, yes, absolutely, it's virtual learning, I could still do that. There's a bit of slacking on that, and do you think that that's going to be sort of a behavior that will continue moving forwards, or do you think it's something that hopefully will sort of taper off?
Well, routines and rituals are usually something that's almost like a muscle. So if you don't really exercise it, people slack, and then once they get back into it, that they pick up right where they left off. There might just be a little adjustment period, but obviously we're hoping for the best, and we're hoping that the transition back into school will help the kids, re-exercise that sense of routine.
Absolutely.
You're absolutely right. And since they're going back to school, what do you think their fears must be toward going back to school, like everything normal again?
I think there are two main fears. That one fear is the lack of knowledge, or some of the materials that they may have slacked on is going to come back and be revisited. And obviously with online schooling, a lot of our kids had extra support with their parents. Cheating, unfortunately, has become a lot easier. And so there's a lot of avoidant behaviors around that, and usually when we do see avoidant behaviors, it's not because they don't want to do something, but they're just afraid because there's a lack of knowledge of how to do it or how to ask for help. There's also a social aspect to it, where kids that were usually a little more socially reserved or socially anxious enjoyed being at home and doing virtual learning because they avoided the social interaction aspect of learning, and they honestly thrived. And there are also some kids who unfortunately were bullied, and so they might be nervous to go back into school because of the lack of support that they might find in person schooling.
So this is very interesting, Fajer. Can you please tell us and share a little bit about what would you recommend, what would you tell our parents about tips or strategies that they can use to prepare themselves for back to school, as well as their children?
So for sure, I think the most important thing is reintroducing schedules and routines into their life. So before they even start school, having a set bedtime, a time to wake up, reducing screen time 2 hours before bedtime. I think it's also important to review some of the materials that they may have took in subjects in the past year before going back into school. And also another important thing is to use social stories or have an open discussion about what to expect, what are some of their fears, and what are ways that they can kind of work together in order to make that transition a little bit smoother for them.
I'm going to be a little bit tricky here, and maybe because of my own personal experience having 3 kids to prepare for this challenging time. How would you deal with resistance? Because as we may know, some of the children may resist that and they don't even know that they're doing that. They're just challenge the parent. So what are your suggestions for the kids that are resistant to this?
So I think resistance is something that's normal with all humans and all people, not just kids. And with having set rules and for the parents to kind of stick their grounds and just ensuring that no matter what they do or how much the kids resist, that the rules are rules, and so even if they don't want to go to bed at a certain hour, that they still have to go into their room and they can't really, you know, watch TV or do whatever they want, and just not giving in to the kids, because I know that for parents, sometimes it's more reinforcing to give in and to just give them what they want, rather than you know, sticking it like through and then maybe getting a tantrum for an hour or 2 hours. It's a little bit more challenging for parents, and so sticking it through, it will decrease over time. They'll learn that rules are rules, and hopefully it will get better.
Set clear boundaries.
Yeah, I think I talk a lot to my patients as well, because they're about to go to school. I get their thoughts and I'm like, are you excited to go to school? I usually get a no. Most times I get a no. But some are actually excited to see their friends, to see their teachers again, you know, get into sort of that normal environment that they're actually used to. But there's always that night before going to school. I remember when I used to go to school, those butterflies, that level of anxiety and everything. You mentioned a couple of things. Do you have any sort of tips and tricks for you know, kids maybe watching us, that, you know, they can try and lower those levels of anxiety, or is it just something that's going to happen and they just have to go through it?
Yeah, I think, you know, the only way through is or the only way past it is just going through it. It's something that there is always a normal level of anxiety and nerves, whether you're excited or whether you're nervous, and it's never as bad as it seems the night before. Just like maybe you know, just calming themselves, sleeping early, like decreasing their screen times, and then just, you know, going for it. I think.
Absolutely, yeah.
You're absolutely right. So how do you think that we can support our children to renew their relationship between their peers and teachers?
So I think there is also two aspects to that. There's a parent aspect to it, where parents can set up play dates, or you know, like enrolling them into summer camp, or creating some activity that they can be a part of, and just being there and supporting their child through initiating social interactions, because it's one of our opportunities to actually support our kids, teaching them how to initiate certain conversations or certain social aspects, and learning how to navigate them. And then also for teachers, they can have icebreakers in class, scheduled like group activities, and including themselves into that, because even though the teachers might be, you know, older or have seen these kids before, you know, there might have been just this like distance because of virtual learning. So just renewing those relationships through icebreakers is a great way.
Yeah, and I think, as Dr. Salman was saying, the anxiety and those butterflies going back, I think everyone is going through that. Parents, teachers, and the student, the kids themselves as well. So for teachers to be also aware of what's happening, it is important to kind of let them bond again and get to meet the kid as well. So what recommendations would you give us to have the school also fully prepared to receive those students back?
So I think there are so many things that we can do, and like I said, just icebreakers or orientations, just classes that are just made for the teachers and the students to kind of reintroduce each other, learn a little bit more about each other, and just having a slower start, you know, maybe doing a little bit of review sessions or review courses before starting into something that's completely new, because even like I said, like kids have already been to school before probably, but it's been a long time, and for them it seems like it's the first time, and so just taking it a little bit slower and being mindful of that change for everyone would be beneficial for parents, students, and also teachers.
Not to stick to what is supposed to be, right? The schedule, and be too stiff about the routine that is meant to happen, and be more organic, more with the children present, be more mindful about what's happening, and how to better address that. Those are very, very good points.
Absolutely. I think we've heard a little bit about sort of the time periods or the sessions possibly in school being because of COVID-19 and what's happening in those long time periods, and yeah, maybe utilize a bit of that for maybe just a teacher sitting down with their students and seeing how they're getting on and things. Sort of, what about, you know, sort of principals, vice principals, if schools have specific psychologists and things like that, what do you think their roles will be throughout this time, and how important is their role with children coming back now?
I think definitely like school counselors are, I think they're also expecting just like an influx of students, but I think for them to just be mentally prepared that maybe the students might not be as comfortable to approach them and to make themselves present or make an active effort to introduce themselves into the classrooms, talk a little bit about what their roles are in the schools, and the same thing for principals as well, and just getting the students a little bit more familiar and more comfortable with them, and having an open door kind of policy, just because I think it is very new, and for a lot of kids, especially school-age kids, they don't have that access to, you know, mental health resources, and they don't have access to counselors necessarily in their daily lives, and so the counselors in the school are going to have a really important role to play with this transition.
So I can't imagine these schools in this sort of situation. I'm imagining kids going up to the counselor and saying, I want to go back home. Yeah. So let's put a scenario out. You know, the parent gets a call from the principal, vice principal, counselor, whoever, or the secretary at the school saying, look, your kid's been a pain. Okay. You know, we sort of recommend you taking them back home. You know, you mentioned sort of a bit of resistance, but where do we put that cutoff? Where do we put that line? Do we just say, you know what, no, let him stay there, let him push, or do we say, okay, let's take him back, give him another day? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think definitely like that resistance is something that's going to be present, and I think even for teachers or student or principals, they might be unaware of what they're doing, but that resistance is only going to delay the inevitable, and so being more patient and understanding and kind of pushing through that, and I don't think it's going to be a day, I think it's going to be a couple of weeks, and so just pushing through that, and just the kids are eventually going to learn how to adapt. Their, you know, school-age children are usually very adaptable, and so I think even for parents and for teachers and for all of the staff, that just patience, I think, is the number one, you know, thing that they should have in mind before going back into school.
Absolutely. I think on behalf of our audience, this has been an absolutely fantastic interview. Thank you so much for being here. I think not just for parents, but parents, kids. I think we spoke about teachers, we spoke about counselors. So a lot of people have a massive, massive role throughout this period. So thank you very much for coming to our interview today.
Indeed. Thank you, Fajer. It's a pleasure having you here again and seeing you at a different environment. Yes. It has been a pleasure, very enriching, and hopefully our viewers have enjoyed it as much as we did.
Thank you for having me. The pleasure
Absolutely, no problem. So let's have a quick break, and please stay tuned.